Part 1.
You will hear a conversation in a mobile phone center between a customer and a mobile phone seller. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 7.
Good afternoon, madam. May I help you?
Oh, yes. I'm looking for a mobile phone, but don't really know where to start. This one looks a very attractive phone.
Ah, yes. That's the Apple iPhone 7s 32 gig. It's very sleek and lightweight. It's only 140 grams. It's a classic look, packed with special features, such as a voice-activated service to assist you, and built-in GPS.
Well, I really only want a mobile which has a good camera and which is easy to use. Oh, and another thing, I don't want it to run out of battery all the time like some of those cheaper phones.
If you want an excellent camera, then this phone has an 8-megapixel camera for photos. You can also talk for up to 8 hours once the battery is charged. On standby, your phone will remain powered for up to 200 hours.
Oh, that sounds good. How much is it, though?
You're looking at £22.50 a month on a fixed 24-month contract. The good thing is that there are no fees payable up front.
Yes, it's a bit pricey. What about this one?
That's the LG G8 phone. I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you when you learn the price. It's £40 per month.
For a 24-month contract?
I'm afraid so. But you're paying for several excellent features. The camera is a colossal 13 megapixels. You can also take still photos while simultaneously recording a video. Another good point is that it is remarkably lightweight at 149 grams, so it's only slightly heavier than the Apple iPhone we just looked at.
What is the battery power?
A lot more impressive than the Apple iPhone. Standby time is 565 hours and talk time 19 hours. It also has a high-definition screen that is second to none due to Quad HD technology. In fact, the screen has 4 times the pixel count of a normal HD screen.
I admit I love the look of the phone, but really it's way out of my price range. Oh look, that's a nice phone. The one with the flip top.
Ah, yes, the Samsung DM S410. That's one of our more basic models, but it's still solid and reliable. Obviously it has hard keys rather than a touch screen, but it's very economical. It's only £20 for the handset, and it's pay-as-you-go thereafter.
What about the camera? Are the pictures of good quality?
That's where the other 2 phones I showed you earlier are far superior in quality of picture than this model. In fact, the camera doesn't even possess a flash. You're also very limited on your talk time. It's only up to 2.5 hours, and standby time is 75 hours. It's also fairly lightweight, considering it's not state-of-the-art technology. It weighs in at 131 grams.
Before listening to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10.
Well, all things considered, I reckon the Apple iPhone 7s 32 gig is the one for me.
Actually, I know that it's out of stock at the moment. We only have the display model to show customers. But if I put in an order today, it will be with you within the week, say around April the 8th.
Great!
So if I could just take your name and contact number, I'll give you a call as soon as it's in.
Oh, thank you. The name's Janet Johnson. That's Johnson with an H. And my mobile number is 0799 678 305 8378.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, madam. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you too for all your help and for your patience.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2. Part 2.
You will hear an extract from a talk about facilities for students with disabilities. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13.
Welcome to Student Times, the programme with all the latest on what's happening at universities around the country. Today we'll be discussing disabled applicants and the kind of support they can expect to find, or not find, at the university of their choice. With me to tell us more is Student Disability Advisor Sally Taylor. Good morning, Sally.
Good morning, Hugh. I'd like to start by pointing out that although 1 in 4 people has some kind of disability, the proportion among students is much lower. This is partly because most students are under 25 and many people only develop their disabilities as they get older, but it's also because some universities don't do much to encourage access. It is true, though, that some have quite sticky problems when it comes to, for instance, wheelchair access, ancient buildings, cobbled streets built centuries ago, and so on. When faced with such a situation, some universities make an extra special effort to provide for students with particular disabilities, while others have specialist accommodation. In fact, all universities should have a written policy statement on students with disabilities, setting out what facilities they have, what their attitude is, and what they're prepared to do. But having said that, only you can properly understand the challenges of any disability you have, and so before accepting a place at a university, or even while you're considering applying, if only to raise the university's awareness, it's good to talk to them and find out how much they can and will do for you. The problem is who to talk to. Most universities and some students' unions have a disability advisor who is supposed to know what facilities they already have and will help with further arrangements if necessary or possible. However, all too often this person is a token. Sometimes it's just an extra responsibility given to a secretary. They don't know what the situation is in practice, and they don't have any real authority to change anything. So, given that for any prospective student it's best to visit a university before applying, it's an especially good idea for students with disabilities or special needs to check whether the place really does come up to scratch. In general, the university should provide personal care and assistance, and there are certain key features to look out for if you have a particular disability, including the following.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20.
Firstly, if your mobility is impaired, check there are ramps and easy access to all buildings, not just accommodation or teaching rooms. Then, when you're inside, look for clear instructions on fire and emergency procedures for the disabled. Also, make sure there are lifts that work, not the usual ones that seem to be out of order half the time. And check for suitable lavatory facilities. There is a different set of things to look for if you suffer from any kind of hearing impairment. There should be induction loops in lecture theatres, flashing sirens in all rooms, and in accommodation, visual doorbells that light up when somebody calls round to see you. If it is your sight that is impaired, there obviously need to be braille translators of books and documents. In all buildings, the stairs, floors, doorways and windows must have clear markings, and there also have to be special fire and emergency procedures for you. If you suffer from dyslexia, you will need a computer for general use and in exams. And as exams may take you longer to complete, you should be allowed extra time in which to do so. This applies to work in general too. There are, of course, many other possible health difficulties that you may suffer from, such as diabetes, epilepsy or heart conditions. If this is the case, check the availability of access to appropriate treatment, including medication and/or therapy. Finally, make sure that in the event of an emergency, it is clear what you and other people who may be involved have to do.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
You will hear a discussion between two science students. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25.
Hi, Mark. Are you going to that lecture on microchip implant technology? I don't think I'll go. It's not that it's not a relevant field of study. It's just that it isn't personally relevant to me. If it were a computer science lecture, though, I wouldn't miss it for anything.
I know. Still, I think the concept of microchip implants is rather intriguing. Whether you like the idea or not, such a technology opens up so many possibilities. Almost everyone stands to benefit from it.
It just sounds so futuristic and like something out of a sci-fi novel to me.
Funnily enough, microchip technology was first predicted in a sci-fi novel over half a century ago. More amazingly still, the prediction didn't fall far short of reality either.
But what sort of person would implant a microchip in their body?
Oh, I don't know. Gadget and techie enthusiasts for one. Whilst we may not have the technology available at the moment to use their full potential, they will have uses in many fields in the future, I'm sure.
But doesn't the implantation of the chip hurt at all? I'd imagine it was quite painful.
Actually, from what I've heard, it's relatively painless. All you feel is a slight prick on your skin as a needle with the chip is inserted under your skin.
Just the thought of it makes my stomach turn. But isn't it quite unsightly? Doesn't the chip show up as a bump on the skin surface?
No, not at all. It's really minute, you see. It's so small it fits into the size of a thumbnail.
Well, it's certainly not my thing for sure.
I think you ought to come to the lecture, though. You might change your mind.
No, you go. If you find out anything interesting, then you can tell me. I'll be around on campus for at least the rest of the afternoon.
OK, you're on.
Great. We'll meet after the lecture then. See you.
Bye.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30.
Hi, Mark. So how was the lecture?
You really missed out.
Really?
Yes, I learned so much. You wouldn't believe how microchip implants will improve our lives in the future.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, from the simple action of allowing us to switch on a light or mechanical device with a wave of a hand to accessing our medical records, microchips will prove indispensable to us in the future.
Indispensable wouldn't be the word I'd use for encouraging people to be so lazy that they can't switch on an electric appliance unaided. I thought remote controls were bad enough. I take your point, though, about using microchips to access medical records.
Also, using microchip implant technology can help secure buildings. Access of buildings in the future will be restricted to individuals with a specific code on their microchip implant. But at the moment, though, there are some problems with the technology.
Like what exactly?
Well, the microchip ID numbers of employees can theoretically be obtained and cloned by any individual standing close enough with a handheld device.
I can't say that I was really in favour of the idea when you first mentioned it. But now you've persuaded me. If it's so easy to breach security, then you're really defeating the whole point of the object, aren't you? By using microchips to secure a building.
Guess so. But there's another brilliant use for microchips that I haven't told you about yet.
Go on.
GPS-enabled chips.
Which are?
Well, microchips that tell you the position of an individual. Like a GPS that tells you the direction when you're in a car, but these tell you where someone is when they're lost and, say, if they're injured or in danger, they can be found easily.
So it's a bit like the microchips that are already used on pets?
Exactly.
Much as I can understand pet owners wanting to microchip their pets, I don't think the case of microchipping humans is as clear-cut. I mean, is it wise for an individual's movements to be known to everyone? That could place some individuals, such as political activists and those escaping persecution, under threat.
Doesn't seem like you're a great fan of microchip implants, then.
Their uses do at best seem rather limited. Well, you won't catch me having a microchip implant in the near future, that's for sure.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4. Part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about fireworks. First, you have some time to read questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this short talk on the subject of fireworks. Now, fireworks, as I'm sure many of you know, were invented in China, though there has long been disagreement as to exactly when, or even in which century. The consensus nowadays, though, is that it was in the 6th, as there is considerable evidence of war rockets being made then. We also know that fireworks were in use by the 7th century in Arabia, where they were called Chinese arrows, reflecting their military potential. It then took a long time for them to spread to Europe. In fact, it wasn't until the 1200s that fireworks made their appearance there. The basic ingredients of fireworks have changed little to this day. Their explosive capacity comes mainly from black powder, also known as gunpowder, which is produced from a mixture of charcoal, sulfur, and potassium nitrate. A modern aerial firework, the kind used nowadays in big public displays, not the small rocket type that you might remember from your childhood, is normally made in the form of a shell, often a sphere about the size of a peach. Inside the shell are a number of stars, surrounded by black powder, and running through the centre of the round shell is a charge that makes the firework explode when it reaches the desired altitude. This is known as the bursting charge. When this explodes, it ignites the outside of the stars, which begin to burn with bright showers of sparks. Since the explosion throws the stars in all directions, you get the huge sphere of sparkling light that is so familiar at firework displays. A shell of this kind is launched from a 75mm diameter mortar, which in some ways resembles the type used by the military. The mortar is a steel, or increasingly for safety reasons, shatterproof plastic pipe. This is likely to be 500mm long and sealed at one end. The other end is aimed at the sky, and at the bottom of the pipe, below the shell, is placed a cylinder containing black powder. This has a long fuse, which projects out of the tube. When this is lit, it quickly burns down to the lifting charge, which explodes to launch the shell. In so doing, it also lights the shell's fuse. The shell's fuse burns while the shell rises to its correct altitude and then ignites the bursting charge so it explodes. More complicated shells are divided into sections and burst in 2 or 3 phases. Shells like this are called multi-break shells. They may contain stars of different colours and compositions to create softer or brighter light, more or less sparks, etc. Some shells contain explosives designed to crackle in the sky, or whistles that explode outward with the stars. The sections of a multi-break shell are ignited by different fuses, and the bursting of one section ignites the next. The shells must be assembled in such a way that each section explodes in sequence to produce a distinct, separate effect. The pattern that an aerial shell paints in the sky depends on the arrangement of stars inside the shell. For example, if the stars are equally spaced in a circle, with black powder inside the circle, you will see an aerial display of smaller star explosions equally spaced in a circle. To create a specific figure in the sky, for instance a heart shape, you create an outline of the figure in stars inside the shell. Then you place explosive charges inside those stars to blow them outward into the shape of a large heart. Each charge has to be ignited at exactly the right time, or the whole thing is spoiled. Many other shapes have particular names, like the willow. This is formed by stars that fall in the shape of willow tree branches, spreading a little to the side and then downwards. The high charcoal composition of the stars makes them long-burning, so they may even stay visible until they hit the ground. The ring shell is fairly basic. It is produced by stars exploding outwards to produce a symmetrical ring of coloured lights. More complex is the pattern created by the palm, which contains large comets or charges in the shape of a solid cylinder. These travel outwards, explode and then curve downwards, like the limbs of a palm tree. The serpentine, the last one for now, is different again. When this one bursts, it sends small tubes of incendiaries scattering outwards in random paths, which may culminate in exploding stars. It can be quite spectacular.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.